Welcome in as we recap week number 1 of the 2025 IHSA football season. We're glad you're with us here on the Friday Night Drive podcast. I'm Matt Rodewald. Good to be with you. Steve Soucie is recovering from a wild week 1 of excitement. Did it take you a couple hours Sunday to kind of like just, get yourself back to normal, so to speak, after all these finishes we had?
A little bit, you were kind of looking at it even after the fact on Saturday, and we got another one of those crazy ones on Saturday afternoon of national prominence. So we never really got a stop during the weekend. It felt like, you just kind of constantly had to be on top of it because there were all these games that just came down to the wire between, when we looked back at the week before we got into it, it was kind of like, looks like there's going to be a lot of really good games out there. And a lot of times that doesn't come to fruition. You've got maybe a couple good ones, and then, a whole list of other ones that don't turn out to be those games like you maybe anticipated. They were all over the place, and then we added some more to the list after the fact. I mean, it was definitely a week 1 that lived up to, whatever hype we were trying to create for it. It certainly demonstrated that was worthy of consideration.
How long have you been covering IHSA football now, if you have to actually put a number on it? What do you think?
This is actually year 34 for me in terms of covering high school football. So
34 for you.
Me what rank that. Yeah, rank that in terms of week 1. I don't know if I can do that, but
I'll do it for you. For me, that's why I asked, because for me, it's been about 20 years, maybe a little more than 20 years. I can't remember a week 1 where we had such great competition. We had such great games. We had some surprises, not so much upsets or disappointments or anything like that, but we had some teams that kind of went, oh, okay, well, you're in the mix now. I'm looking at you, Glenbard West. But it's also one of those where I can't remember week 1 where we had some Chicago teams or Illinois teams that went and played some big boys around the country, and they had some guts to go ahead and do that and played very well. I thought Illinois as a whole shined on the national stage. What was your take from that standpoint?
Yeah, it looks like, over the last maybe, let's say, decade, when we have those games where, some of our marquee programs kind of step out and play those types of games, aside from maybe a few, success stories for East St. Louis on that national stage, doesn't seem like we have a lot of them where we come back with the W. And that was what was really kind of stood out to me about that game this weekend with Mount Carmel and Moeller. It was yet another one of those fantastic finishes. In that last minute, it was like I was kind of following along on Twitter. I was not watching the game, but I was kind of following along, and I saw that Moeller had scored like in the last minute, and I should have known better. I thought to myself, well, looks like they were going to put up a valiant effort but not win. And I went away from it, and then I came back about 10 minutes later, and I was like, oh, what just happened? And then I saw the clip, and they had that touchdown. They could have potentially tied it and kicked the point, but they decided to go for 2 well-executed play. Emmett Dowling, Quentin Burrell hooked up on that 2-point conversion and got them the win over Moeller. That's the kind of game that, maybe Illinois teams have gone over and fared well in those games, made a good showing for themselves, but they don't often come back from those types of road trips with victories. So that was a pretty good sign from a really good Mount Carmel team, to be fair. That team is loaded with Division I talent. I'm not surprised they made and went a good accounting for themselves, but even I, knowing that, wasn't sure they were going to be able to come away from that game with a win, and they did.
Yeah, it's kind of a prove it kind of game, in a sense of like, okay, we got a lot of talent. Every publication is ranking you number 1 across the board here in the state of Illinois, and you have Moeller in your schedule. You're going to go there on a Saturday. Now, show me something. They did. They showed some guts there to play with a team that's historically one of the best in the country. And so, for them to come out with a win kind of gives you the, okay, Mount Carmel is here, as we expected, but they've definitely proved it. And so now everybody in the Catholic League now has to see that. And boy, do they get rewarded this week with St. Rita, huh? How about that?
Yeah, and that's one of those situations where you look at Mount Carmel's schedule even before they play a game like Moeller, and you know that they're going to have everyone kind of putting that bullseye on them. But it's definitely an interesting sign heading into that game, that rivalry game. Carmel still probably coming off that high a little bit of winning that game over in Moeller. St. Rita pulling off that win, a good win for them in week 1 as well. So the hits keep coming, if you will.
East St. Louis has been interesting because of what they've elected to do the last couple of years, go from 5A to 6A and stay in that class. And it's always been one of those, man, I'd like to see them in 7A. Man, I'd like to see them play higher because of the dominance they've had when they're playing anybody but Cary Grove. But it's one of those things where they have so much talent, and then this sort of kind of was left to, a mystery of whether they would play up or not. I heard you talking about it earlier last week. Do we get a resolution on whether or not they're going to play up? They're going to stay back in 5A? What are they going to do?
Yeah, they actually declared, I believe it was on Thursday, they did say that, yes, they're going to go back up to 6A again. That's once again a 2-year commitment. I'll try to give you the thumbnail version of this. The Southwestern Conference, which East St. Louis is a member of, basically their other members told them, if you're going to play up, you can only play up to 6A. And if you want to play higher than that, essentially, we're not going to play you anymore. So that was basically the way it goes, because all of the other members of the Southwestern Conference would qualify in either 7 or 8A. And essentially, they don't want to get eliminated in the postseason by East St. Louis.
Yep.
So, in a nutshell, if we're going to get beat by somebody, it's not going to be you. So, that's the long and the short of it. So, I had heard that there might have been some buckling on that, and East St. Louis was actually maybe going to be given the opportunity to go all the way up the ladder if they chose to, but they ultimately did not do that. I don't know if the conference said no, you can't, or East St. Louis declined to do that. I'm not sure the specifics of it, but I'd heard some rumors that maybe at least that was on the table again. I don't know if that was true.
So it's interesting to see that some teams are trying to avoid playing East St. Louis, like specifically in November. One of those teams, I think, is Batavia, to be honest with you, which is why they moved up to 7A and stayed in 7A. And, off the heels of that news, it did not work out for them in terms of the way they finished the game against Glenbard West. What did you take away from that game more than anything else? That Glenbard West is maybe better than we thought, or maybe should be given more conversation, or that Batavia is still a work in progress and we might see a different team, say week 5?
Well, I remember this is kind of what I'm looking at in terms of what was going on with Glenbard West. I went to see Glenbard West play Batavia in week 1 last year, and I just remember thinking the differences between that team that I saw last year and the team that I saw on the field on Friday night. Now, granted, I didn't watch that entire game. I was watching snippets. We were on the air. I didn't get a hold, but the thing that kept jumping out to me through the screen, this looks like a very, very more significantly quicker Glenbard West team. On both sides of the football. They were flying to the football. They were making explosive plays on the offensive side of the football and seemed to have added team speed pretty much across the board. I'm not exactly sure as to how that happened, and maybe that's just my perception, but it felt like this was a much more physically stronger team and much faster Glenbard West team than we saw last year. Obviously wanting to reverse the trend last year of not making the playoffs, finishing 4 and 5. And to their credit, they play in that brutal conference, the Western Suburban Silver, where their teams have emerged and come out of the woodwork. So that's no longer Glenbard West, dominant conference for them. Their non-conference schedule last year was brutal. Batavia, followed by Loyola. Yep. This year, it's Batavia, followed by Joliet Catholic. So this is a school that, at the end of the day, when you go back and you look at their regular season schedule, I'll put it out there right now. They're going to be in the top 5 amongst playoff points accumulated by teams in the state.
Easily.
That's what that schedule is. It's that simple. They're going to have 55, 56 playoff points. Will that be a 55, 56 playoff points with a 7-2 record? Or will that be on the outside looking in again like it was last year? So I don't think it will be this year, and obviously that win is a really good start towards getting them there. But there are lots of hurdles that they're going to have to clear just to get themselves in the field. It is one of the maybe the strongest schedule anyone has outside of the Chicago Catholic League.
What's fascinating about that schedule is a lot of those hurdles that you referred to, they're at home this year, which is helpful. Lions and I believe York both fall at home, so that works out really well for them. And then have Joliet Catholic come to you. Is this a 2-year deal for them? Do you know that off the top of your head? And just wondering if this would be the first of the two?
I am not sure. I think it might have been a one-off, but I am not positive about that.
Either way, have them come to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's another wrinkle here, too, that I think is it's a smaller wrinkle, but something that I noticed from Friday night, one of the scores that really jumped off the page at me, Hinsdale Central really put together a dominant performance against West Aurora. Are they ready to get back in that mix? Because you want to talk 5, 6, 7 years ago, Hinsdale Central was right in the mix at the top of that conference. So you add Lions, you add York, you add an improved Hinsdale Central team to that mix, Downers Grove North. That is an absolute gauntlet there. Those 4 schools right there in the pack of Hinsdale Central is kind of coming back to where they were before. And then you have Glenbard West. That is a 5-team conglomerate right there that I think can match any 7, 8-team conference in the state for power.
Yeah, and Hinsdale Central gets Naperville Central this weekend. So, a measuring stick game. We're going to find out whether, and I hate to say it like this, but I just don't know how good West Aurora is because of the Upstate 8 Conference and the way they played over the last couple of years. Yes, they went 9-0, and yes, they had a great season last year, but West Aurora has historically not been able to keep it consistent from year into year. So I'd love to see that because I think that'd be great for the city down there for sure. So, but that was discouraging to see, and we'll see where they end up the rest of the way, and I think they'll pile some wins together. But how good of a win that is, I don't know. But to see the dominance definitely caught my eye too, and I was thinking the same thing. Like, okay, well, are the Red Devils back in the mix here? I guess week 2 we're going to find out when they take on Naperville Central. You're watching the Friday Night Drive podcast as we go through week 1 here, and you feel free to chat with us on YouTube as we go live here. We notice the weather on the go is always a favorite of ours. He's always posting scores. Dixon and Byron, week 2 already. That's something you want to see week 7, right? Not week 2, not right away.
I've got a complaint to lodge with some of these schedule makers out here. Last week we get Prairie Ridge and Cary Grove. This time we've got Byron and Dixon week 2. Let's work on getting some build up for these big games, guys. Let's not unload the register right out of the gate here. Come on now. Let's pull this together. Give me a week 7, week 8 game. Give me a little hype for it.
And Souce, this gives me another opportunity to bring up the idea of the Soucie open house for scheduling that we will do in March next year. We're just going to do it. We'll find a way to do it. If you need a game and you need a game, we're just going to bring you all together and just come on over.
Yep.
Just the open house, BYOB or something like that. But no, it's open house scheduling. We're going to make sure we fix this. It's not just for non-conference scheduling. Clearly, we need to do all schedules with this.
Yes, exactly. I think so. I think that definitely needs to be handled. It needs to be handled differently than it is.
Yeah, and we appreciate all the chat conversation that we get. So jump on in with our YouTube channel. We're going to take a time out, and when we come back, we're going to look through the league breakdown. We've already kind of talked about the West Suburban a little bit. We talked about the Catholic League a little bit. I want to ask you about the Dukane because we've given them a lot of coverage the last couple of years. Some interesting results out of there, and then just we go through our hodgepodge of they got to win. It's always fun as we go through week 1 on the Friday Night Drive podcast. Stay with us.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
I like Reich.
I like Reich.
Since 2016, it's been my privilege to represent the people of the 63rd District. I want to continue representing you as an independent voice in Springfield.
I like Reich. We like Reich.
Wrapping up week number 1 and tying a bow on it, Matt Rodewald, Steve Soucie. Make sure you follow us on Twitter. You're the Souce. That's THE Souc. See, I can spell. How about that? It's not too, yeah, it's not that hard, right? Go find him on X. You can find me on X as well at Matt_Rodewald. The league that stood out to you the most, I would imagine, was the West Suburban, and we've talked a little bit about it. If you had to take a second league, Catholic League going 16-8, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good start for those guys.
Yeah, and when you consider on top of that 3 of those 8 losses were to other Catholic League teams.
Mm-hmm. Right, there's always the case, yeah.
That makes the mark pretty good. So you're just kind of looking at all those things in perspective, and it becomes, you kind of expect that from them, but when you also look at it from another perspective, they almost have to do that. Because when you start getting into the conference season, you're going to have those crossover games. You have those other problems. Every one of those schools looks at their schedule and says, oh, my gosh. So there's almost a pressure to get through that non-conference schedule, at the very least 1-1, and you breathe a little bit easier at 2-0. But if you come out of that non-con at 0-2 and head into that Catholic League schedule, oh, my goodness, you've got a problem.
Let me ask you about scheduling, since we've been on it throughout the first couple of weeks here. It's a 4-team division. That's how the Catholic League sets itself up, and it's been that way for a while with the CCL and the East Suburban combo. Is there ever talk about expanding that to get, say, 6 teams, or so that you can have the automatic division winners, so to speak, and so that they would have automatic placements in the postseason? I can't imagine it's never been discussed in like a deep conversation, but it has to have been talked about a little bit.
I think some of it comes down to the fact that I think maybe the upper 6 don't want to all be in the same conference with one another, because it becomes a very difficult proposition for you to think about it for a second. If you had to pick, it might be difficult to figure out which 6 you take. But if you decided to expand into 4 6-team conferences, what if you're a really good football team, but you're only the 5th or 6th best team in your actual conference? You don't have a chance to get out of that, because if you're someone else, you've got to play Loyola, you've got to play Mount Carmel,
right.
You've got to play Brother Rice, you've got to play Nazareth, you've got to play all of those teams and play some other games on top of it. It becomes, I think, burdensome. So I think the intent here was to at least kind of spread the wealth a little bit, if you would, so everybody has an opportunity to try to maybe not get bogged down in the bottom, being a really good team, but being at the bottom of that really good group.
Right.
So the blue is obviously really, really strong, but some of those other conferences, I think you kind of see it distributed a little bit in that way. I think that was the intent. I don't know if it's working, but I think that was the intent.
Yeah, I'm not looking at 8, because I can see a divisions of 8 might be real. You're going to get somebody at the bottom there that says, hey, wait a minute, we would have been fine. But the other thought is just 6 seems like a sweet spot. 4, I get it, but wondered if 6 would do it. And we talk about scheduling. We have Mount Carmel going to Cincinnati. We've got Brother Rice and Loyola, going to Indiana. We had, Montini. Where were they this weekend? That's another one where they were out of town. Those are things that you could probably eliminate a little bit if you can get to 6. But that's just a thought. I'm just spitballing here. So we appreciate Spawn for jumping in on that. Let's switch over to Loyola. I don't know what to make of Maryville as a team. I know what to make of them as a program historically, but as a team this year, I don't know. But another exciting win for the CCL with Loyola coming out 1-0, and they needed that win. You talked about that Friday. Walk me through why they exactly needed it to make sure they got a win in week 1.
Well, when you look at it just from the perspective of things, they don't have a game this week. So when it really comes right down to it, the maximum record that Loyola could compose would be 8-0. And for the purposes of seeding, they would be grouped as an 8-win team. They still have to play Mount Carmel. They still have to play the schedule that they play. So let's just say hypothetically Mount Carmel defeats Loyola in the regular season. Then, and they win all their other games, the best that they're going to be is a 7-win team. And in that 8A bracket, then that means that they're probably going to fall to the middle of that bracket. So maximum, with no game in week 2, they will get to the 8-win plateau. they'll immediately be seated behind all of the 9-win teams.
Right.
And since they have a week 2 game, they also get no playoff points for the week. So they usually they have a pretty good amount of playoff points, but only getting 8 opponents to quantify when everyone else gets 9, you're going to have a hard time keeping up. So, I mean, even with a good schedule, they're probably going to max out around 40. So it was a very important situation for them to get that win because, like I said, you got some games down the line that you're certainly not guaranteed to win. And, looking down the line, I mean, they're already putting themselves behind that, not that I'm saying they're not going to get into the playoffs or anything.
No, I get it, yeah.
When they get in, it's going to hurt their seed. I mean, and that's the reality of the situation. And if they do pick up a loss, 2 Catholic League losses, every time they lose, it actually moves them down one more tier than it would, with just that one loss. The fact that they don't have that week 2 game.
If they lose, say 2-3 times, not so much 2, but if they go 5-3, for example, just because the schedule is what it is, they're the most nightmarish road team that you would get, right? In 8A, that's like the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm kind of looking at it from that perspective. If you, like I said, just totally speculative. If they win all their games and lose to Mount Carmel in week 9, they would finish in the 7-win tier
7-1
with about 40 points. And if you look at past history, a 7-win team with about 40 points ends up being somewhere in the 15 to 18 seed variety. So I mean, if you know bracketing, you know what the possibilities would be there. Like, it's just, it's simple logic. So, I mean, that's just kind of speculating way down the line here, but that was the combination of, it's just very important for Loyola to stack as many wins as they can because they have that handicap of not having a week 2 game.
That screams back-to-back, or I should say Loyola Mount Carmel twice in 3 weeks is what that sounds like, right there. Week 9 and then the second round, and Mount Carmel's on the road for that, if that's the case. That is a long, long way off. But I love the speculation. We're already doing that. That's fascinating to me. Let's talk about some individual performers. First off, some of the best passer and the best rusher in the state that I've seen so far. Jonas Williams, again, I'm not sure whether I'm so impressed with him or let alone this entire team of what Lincoln Way East was able to do to Maine South. I cannot remember the last time Maine South got shut out in football, period. I have no idea.
Yeah, that was a game that I expected Lincoln Way East to win. I'll be completely honest with you. Did not expect them to do it in the fashion that they did. And I had some questions about this defense. Not that I didn't think that they would be a good defense, but could they be elite?
Right.
That's a sign that they could be. That's very much a sign that they could be elite. The fact that they were able to just kind of keep Maine South completely in check and not let up. I mean, because that game was, pretty much in hand at halftime. And I know that they probably didn't go, ones all the way through. That was a problem that Lincoln Way East had last year, was they had a lot of games where they were effectively over at halftime and their guys were not extremely accustomed to 4 quarters of football. That's an argument for another day. I mean, right. I don't know how many times that's going to happen this year based on what happened, out of the gates here. But it's a really impressive thing that they've built there. I know they were really unhappy with the way last season ended in that loss to Loyola in the semifinals, and they seem to be very much on a mission to steamroll whatever gets in their path in the quest of trying to get back and get another 8A title.
I was already thinking of the possibility of a Lincoln Way East Mount Carmel state championship matchup to wrap up the weekend, Thanksgiving weekend, just based on the star power alone. All those D1 guys over at Mount Carmel, all the talent that you have on the Lincoln Way East side. It's one of those matchups that I'd hope we get. It would be great to see. But at the same time, it shows the depth in that class right now, is that we've talked about Loyola, Mount Carmel, Glenbard West, getting back in the mix for at least to get in the conversation. All these teams in Class 8A, because of what we've seen with the change in class formula, so to speak. And then there's Lincoln Way East still doing what they do quietly. They had, I think I felt like they had the quietest summer off-season wise in terms of conversation that everyone had about everybody else except them. Was that fair?
Yeah, I mean, I went out and saw them a couple of times this summer, and I talked to Jonas a little bit, and I talked to some other guys, and it just seems like, I don't want to say it's like cruise control, but it is just, that program is so locked in on its mission. They understand it, their kids buy in, they do what they're supposed to do, and they have that kind of way about them that is like, process, believe in the process, do your job, do what you're supposed to do, and everything will work out in the end. And it's hard to argue with the blueprint that they've established there.
Let's go from passing to running, and Aaron Stewart, I think he just picked up another first down as we're talking, because it's one of those nights where he had 438 yards. Warren goes as he goes. How good can they be if he's going to keep doing that? That's a good Hersey team. I don't know about great. I don't know how good they can be, but I tell you what, Hersey does not want to see Warren ever again. If that's the kind of running back they're going to throw out 2 years in a row.
Well, one of the elite wrestlers in the state, and I think he brings that mentality to the football field. He's just one of those guys that seems to put up these monster games every once in a while. And it's funny because, 5-6 years ago, you always kind of hung your hat on Warren being a defensive-minded program. Mm-hmm. And recently it's been more of, well, we got this guy, and we're going to see if we can score 50 points a game, and if you can keep up with us, well, fine, try. I'd be interested to see, with one of those Warren-based defensive teams and Stewart, where you're just going to get a bunch of yards out of him and then hold everybody to 6 points and just frustrate the crap out of everyone you play. But that's what they are. I'm interested to see if that's sustainable over the entire season for them. Last year that wasn't. He had that fast start last year, and they didn't quite deliver at that level for the rest of the year. Not that you're expecting someone to go out and get 300 and 400 yards rushing every game, but they kind of let down a little bit a couple of times in their conference slate in games that I thought, more often than not, that's a Warren win. Yeah. It wasn't last. So will they be able to just kind of answer the bell in a conference that I think over the last couple years has gotten a little bit deeper? It's no longer Warren and the Chasers. It's Warren and a couple of other teams that are kind of on the same level.
I just wonder if we'll see the same type of Libertyville, same type of Lake Forest. I mean, Lake Zurich put 3 points on the board against Fremd over the weekend. So I wonder if there is that depth that you talk of this year, as opposed to what we've seen the last couple of years. So, while you might be right, I'm starting to wonder.
I kind of like that Stevenson bunch too. I think they deserve to be put kind of in the conversation.
Yeah, that's true. We're going to find out a little bit about them this weekend for sure.
But like I said, you got 3, 4, 5 teams in a league that you're at least having a conversation about. Yeah. In the past, I don't know if we really had that. I don't know if it was kind of Warren and everybody else.
Yeah, I think you're right. Before we get to some of the performances, I want to ask you about the Dukane Conference, because St. Charles North, I was very impressed with that win, just because the way they went down there to Minooka and got that win. And of course, the block of the weekend, in my eyes, was that lead block and the 2-point conversion. I think I have now Dad and Mom now following me on social media as a result of that. So that's not what I'm trying to do, but I'm just saying, hey, that's a nice block, and here's everybody coming in. If you have great fundamental, sickos, intense football plays, send them to me and I will point them out. That's how I do it. But what do you think about the conference as a whole here? St. Charles North, to me, stands out as the premier team to beat in that league right now. I know Batavia's had that success, and they have some experience coming back and gone to the state championship game, but I just feel like right now it's a little more even than you think in that league.
I think it's going to be interesting to see, St. Charles North kind of beefed up that non-conference schedule, starting with this good Minooka team. They play home with Flossmoor in week 2. That's a very athletic team. How do they deal with that? I'm interested to see how that plays out. But, when you look at this league now, I think we're starting to get back to that same situation that we've had the last couple of years. Wheaton North, Wheaton Warrenville seems to be on its way back.
Yeah, nice win.
I'm willing to bet that Batavia is chomping at the bit to prove that isn't, that loss to Glenbard West is not going to define them. You just kind of look through that, and I mean, I'm not sure what Geneva is right now.
I don't either.
I can't get anything from that result last week. I don't know.
I got nothing from that result last week, to be honest with you.
So I don't know what they are, but we've talked about this before. It feels like this is going to be yet another year where you're going to have 2 or 3 games where we're going to be on the show and we're going to be talking about, oh, that game's tied. That game's got 4 minutes left and someone just went up by a field goal. And it's not going to be just one game in that league. It's going to be 2 or 3 of them. They're all coming down to the wire because the talent levels are so comparable. I think there's going to be a lot of games in that league where one mistake is going to turn it one way or another. That's how good I think some of those teams, that you're thinking in your mind's eye, you're thinking, well, somebody's got to finish 4th or 5th place.
Yep.
And when dust clears, it's going to be a pretty good 4th or 5th place team when it's all said and done.
There's some dangerous stretch coming up here for both Wheaton North and for Geneva. Wheaton North getting a nice win, I think, against Simeon, having them come out. I think that's the second of 2 on that contract. They go to Stevenson this week, so that'll be a fascinating one for us to watch this Friday. But Geneva, Larkin, you're not going to learn a lot there. They scored 7 touchdowns in the first 7 drives of the first half. Great. Clock was running the entire fourth quarter. But they go to Oswego now. And that is going to be fascinating because after that, they go to St. Charles North. Geneva hasn't been home yet, so they'll have 3 straight road games to start here. Going to learn whether Geneva is going to be one of those teams that can make another deep run in the state tournament here. And if we don't learn that quickly, then we just kind of wait for St. Charles North and Batavia and then everybody else to try and fall in place, maybe fall in line. I still think that Wheaton South's win over Glenbard South, not so much the win itself, but the impressive dominance was something to make note of. And what do they have? Lions this week, I think. And so you're gonna, again, this is where we were last year with this conference. We were sort of going, where are these non-conference matchups with some of the power leagues and maybe that second team, third team in the wherever you want to rank them, so to speak. It gives you a lot of trying to figure out how these leagues work. And again, these are matchups that are huge from a playoff point standpoint, especially when you look at that Geneva Oswego game. There are a lot of people in, say, Yorkville that really want Oswego to make sure they get that win because they know what's going to happen the other way the rest of the way.
Well, tip of the cap to Oswego, too. You didn't mention it there, but a nice win for them in week 1 as well. That team lost a lot of people from a team that was very successful last year. Didn't know what to expect from them. Kind of an ominous week 1 game. Naperville Central, a good, solid 8A program. And Oswego responds with a huge effort in that one. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting because I'm not sure. Maybe Naperville Central's down a little bit, but this is going to be an excellent way to plant flag here with Geneva and Oswego in week 2. I think that's a really great game too. There are a lot of week 2 games here, and we've mentioned a couple of them. There are several other ones where it's just kind of like, okay, you showed me something in week 1. Yeah. What you got for me now? I mean, it seems like there's a whole bunch of those games out there where it's like, I'm really kind of keeping my eye on them. It's, there may be not, 2 top 10 teams going against each other, but they're 2 teams that are vying for positions or to get themselves into the discussion. So I think that's what makes the week 2 schedule pretty fascinating. There seems to be a lot of games that are just like
one
that.
Jumps off as a Nazareth Morgan Park game. I'm like, okay, let's see how that goes. Yeah. Before we wrap things up here, we like to let's talk about some of the teams that got some wins. That it's been a little while since they've gotten wins. How about Joliet Central, the best team in Joliet, 1-0. Go Steelman, because Joliet Catholic's 0-1 and Joliet West is 0-1, so we're just going to go ahead and give them the crown for now. How about that?
Yeah, really, really nice win for them in that sense. I mean, first time since 2018 that they won a season opener. The thing that I found when doing a little bit more research on this, I'm pretty positive on this. Someone could correct me on this. I believe you have to go back into the 1990s to find a winning streak for Joliet Central. That means winning more than one game in a row. So that's a really they have an opportunity to do that against a resurgent West Chicago team this week. But the ability to actually have a shot at that is something that they haven't often had. So good for them, good for the Steelmen.
And Joliet Central, West Chicago, good scheduling for both of you. Good job. That's the kind of matchup you want to see for sure. How about Plainfield Central? They went 0-9 last year. They're 1-0.
Yeah, that was one of the things where, I felt like Plainfield Central felt like they had the ability to maybe, come back a little bit and be a little bit better after that season that, to be honest with you, they're all trying to put behind them because they gave up a ton of points last year and were not very competitive in pretty much all of their games. The one game that they were competitive in last year was the game that they played on in week 1 again. They got that 3-point victory. So for them, maybe they get a little bit of momentum behind them and see if they can get this going a little bit better for them this time around. So, so that's definitely a good sign for Plainfield Central moving forward.
I have a couple of thoughts about teams from downstate, but from the rest of the state, because we've been very hyper-local in the suburbs in Chicago, and when that usually happens in week 1. What jumped out at you across the state that's not East St. Louis that you kind of went, oh, that's interesting?
There were a couple things that, just kind of like looking at the overall view that got me going. I went over and looked. I know the opponent wasn't very strong, but I took a peek at Bishop McNamara on Saturday.
Yeah.
And I know the Lawrenceville program is not very good, and they're not in a great place right now. But McNamara hung a big number on them and showed. I saw a little bit. I'm not saying we're all the way back here, but I saw a little bit of what I remember about that program on Saturday afternoon. A pretty strong, dominating performance. And maybe they're on their way back. I'll say that. They're on their way. I'm not saying they're all the way back because that would be something else. And that was one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting when we looked at that thing. Another going real small here. Deer Creek Mackinac was pretty impressive. I thought kind of took Eureka and did some stuff to them there, and Eureka's a program that's done a real nice job over the last few years. One of the premier teams in that Heart of Illinois Conference. So I thought that was a nice win. The other one that kind of jumped out at me, and I'm not sure how good these teams are, off the rip, but Dukane was a team that kind of surprised me with their week 1 result, a near 30-point win over Mount Carmel. So that kind of jumped off the page. That kind of jumped off the page for me. I was looking at that, and I was like, maybe there's something going on there. Maybe the Indians are on their way back to prominence because, like you said, nobody really does that to Mount Carmel. So that was definitely one that kind of jumped off the page.
Not so much the win, but Rochelle all over Geneseo made me ask the question, can they win the Interstate 8? And I know Sycamore's had a stranglehold on that. I know Canelan just went out to Rock Island and dominated out there. But I had to ask the question this week to my head going, I wonder if the Hubs can actually win the league. And if they can, that place is going to be fun. I want to go through a couple of them for you. Sullivan, 61-6 over Arcola. Okay, why does that matter? 330 yards rushing combined between a couple of guys on 22 carries. That means 15 yards a carry in that win. So if you're a coach going, that will work. If we can do that, that's good game planning right there. Central A&M down in Moequa, junior quarterback Emmett Stenger. He had 323 yards passing, and I like to see Central A&M kind of in the mix. That's always one of those programs where I'm like, when they're good, the rest of Central Illinois seems to be really good as well. And how about Mark Ramsey, the new head coach at Pana? They got to win, his first win as the head coach, but it's his 333rd win. It's now 4th all time. The last time we saw him, he was the head coach at St. Teresa winning a state championship there. But did you hear what happened to them on their way there?
No, I didn't.
The bus caught on fire.
Oh my gosh.
Go look at the interwebs and you will see pictures of a charred up. This isn't a little fire. This is the thing burned down, basically. Everyone's okay. Wow. But that was on the way there to their game. So talk about Mark Ramsey's a football lifer. We know that. 330 wins. He will never be able to tell a story about a first game experience like that, and nobody else can either. Especially winning
absolutely not. Yeah, that is something else. I
it burned down. Yes, and everyone is okay. All right, so that wraps it up for us. Looking ahead to week 2 real quick, just something that, where you're looking to go, what you're looking to pay attention to this week.
Well, I think, one of those things that when you look at that schedule, you just kind of have to look at the fact, we talked about it a little bit, you got Mount Carmel and St. Rita, that kind of jumps off the page a little bit at me. You mentioned another one of them that I find really intriguing, that Nazareth-Morgan Park game, after what Morgan Park, kind of brought Downers Grove North down to the wire.
Did not expect that.
Morgan Park, from all reports that I got on, I wasn't at the game, but they have the very talented Nasir Rankin, who's going to Illinois as a specialist. But the thing that kind of jumped off the page to the people that were talking to me was Morgan Park looks huge in the trenches, which if they have that trench play to go along with what is typically a good group of specialists, watch out. I mean, Morgan Park to me is a team that I'm definitely keeping on my radar in 5A right now until proven otherwise, and I don't think I'm going to be proven otherwise. I think this is a viable team to do some real damage in a 5A class now that with some removals suddenly becomes, I think, really, really wide open for a lot of different
teams. For a team
teams
like that, no doubt about it. I will be keeping it local this week, keeping an eye out at the old Central Rockets, Rocket Hill, because we talked about Cary Grove and Prairie Ridge, but Cary Grove now comes in 0-1, and the Central Rockets coming off their best season in 18 years, got a shutout win in week 1 on the road. They're coming home. That place is going to be on fire. And Cary Grove better be careful, because you could easily walk out of there 0-2, and that's not exactly what they want. And so it'll be interesting to see that atmosphere before the show coming up on Friday night. Next time you and I will be together will be Friday night, 9:30. Make sure that you join us for all the live scores. We'll have the recaps from all the writers all around town and all around the state. And, of course, we will have a whole lot more as we have some highlights, too, as we join you Friday night, 9:30, week 2 coming up. Soucie, it's been fun. We'll see you then.
Thanks, Matt.